without further ado, let's get started. We have a big expert insights coming up, and it's called Big in Japan, Trends and Opportunities in the World's second largest health market. And our expert for this session is Stefan Sandström, founder and CEO at BioSector in Japan. Welcome, Stefan. I should also mention we're going to leave 5 minutes for questions for Stefan. So keep that in mind. So if you want to submit those, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be here. And I am approaching 18 years in Japan now. I have the best life you can imagine if you like living in Japan, which I do. I've lived all the time in metropolitan Tokyo, which is around 40 million people, translated to 4 times Sweden. And it's a wonderful place. I could talk for all the 30 minutes about it, but I won't. So this is what drew me to Japan in the beginning, the martial arts of Kendo. And I do this a lot. I take it seriously. And I do practice with the Imperial Palace Guards, the personal bodyguards of the Emperor of Japan. So that's my pride. Okay. So what I do, I help non-Japanese companies to do business with Japanese pharmaceuticals. And I do this in various capacities. I can be just a representative. I can be a supporter, coach. I can also be a mentor or an agent or a sales representative. It matters what the customer wants. I'm quite flexible. And I see myself as a catalyst to make business happen. That's what I like. I like also when people grow, so both things. And for clarity, I never invoiced a Japanese company. So there you go. Oh, this one is a little broken. Okay. So let's talk about what Japan is. We have a biopharma boom. It is the second largest market in the world. We have a government who is wholly supporting this industry. It's considered one of the 9 key industries of Japan for the future. And the government put in $25 billion into making Japan the world-leading bioeconomy by 2030. And $25 billion, that is enough money to make a huge difference. So think about that. It comes with many things that happens. And what they want to do, and there are so many incentives for international collaboration between academia, business, academia, and business. Japan really wants to stand out as a country that is not insular anymore. They used to be, but they don't want to be in this industry. They have realized that we need the world to grow. And one of the things you can check out on the internet is GTB, Greater Tokyo Biocommunity. Everything you would ever need as wet labs, animal testing, various types of laboratories and what are called hubs and things are there, and it's listed in a good way. Let's talk about the Japanese language. It is very complex. Wa here means harmony or peace, depending on context. And everything that happens in Japan is based in harmony. So the problems come with language barriers. Luckily, this industry is inherently global, and you will always find English-speaking people in all the companies. So that's easy. You need to build relationships before you start building business. So you need to establish rapport. You need to ensure that your ambition and your willingness to work with your partners for a long term is there. And you need to manage the expectations. aligning the expectations of your partners, your suppliers, your customers, your people in Japan. Without that, you will not succeed. I know this presentation is a little bit over the top, but I enjoy that. Oops. So the stakeholders, the main ones that you need to be aware of and work with is, first of all, the PMDA, which is the regulatory authority. And I want to underline, I am not a regulatory consultant. I don't do reimbursement. So please don't ask those questions, okay? But they're very important. They only work in Japanese, so you will probably need a local partner for this. Then we have the JBA, which is the Japan Bioindustry Association. They are the mother of PHRM. So the Bioindustry Association, they do everything bio, except regenerative medicine, ATMP, and CGT. So that is part of PHRM. And JBA and PHRM, together with one more organization that I won't talk about, they organize BioJapan every year in Yokohama. And it's Asia's largest and arguably best trade show to be at. And I've already met people today who were there last time. You also have much help from the EU-Japan Center, and especially if you're an SME, they also have loads of reports and data sheets that are important. They're free of charge. And in Japan, you also have JETRO, the Japan External Trade and Investment Organization. They not only have fantastic reports and data sheets to help you, they also give you support. They help you with target lists. They help you understand the ecosystem that you're looking into for free. So you don't need consultants like me for that. So the homework you can do yourself quite easily. So how do you become successful in Japan then? Well, the first thing is to understand this thing about respect. We usually understand that quite easily. It's very important in Japan. You will never find a whole country as prepared for everything as the Japanese people are. So customary, this is an example, you send out a presentation 2 days before an important meeting with some notes. And all the people on the Japanese side of the meeting, they will have read this, they will have made notes, they would have created questionnaires to be answered during the meeting. So they prepare on a completely different level than at least I was used to when I lived in Sweden. The politeness level is, if you've been in Japan, it's everywhere in society. Even when you need to push yourself onto a train because it's full, people do it in a polite manner. I talked about harmony, and I talked a little bit about ambition. If you're not ambitious, why would anyone want to work with you? This is one of my favorite words, gaman. It is that very special Japanese sense of patience. I'm sure you have seen it in movies. And so in order to, what you can expect from doing business in Japan is one thing. But what you need to do business in Japan are basically these three things. You need a budget. You need to have a budget that is realistic. You need to have a plan based on reality, not wishful thinking. And you need to be patient. It does help if you also have passion for what you're doing, because that is something that always shines through. And passion equals ambition. And maybe all of you know this word, gaijin. It means foreigner. And as foreigners, we need to forge strong relationships in Japan, building rapport and building trust. So you need help from the locals. You need like lawyers, HR, regulatory consultants, you need accounting, you need scriveners, you need real estate agents, you need places to work. So when you work with this, I think the most important thing is you need to think about working side by side. If it's a customer, if it's a supplier, doesn't matter. You need to work side by side because life is tough. But if we work together, it can be a little easier. So the key market drivers then that you should bear in mind. So the first one I would want to highlight is aging population. I'm sorry I put it in number 2, but that's a small glitch. The aging population of Japan means that, first of all, it's the oldest society in the world. They're approaching an average age of 60 years, which means that cancer and many other diseases like Parkinson and neurological problems are highly prevalent in Japan, which of course means the market's quite nice. It's a rich country. They have 120 million people, give or take. So historically, Japan has been insular because the market is big enough. You could make, before large molecules came around, all the companies were basically focusing on the domestic market. But now that we have seen the rise of the new modalities, Japan has opened the borders. So some of the organizations that they had, their only purpose was to make it difficult for foreign companies to do business in Japan. They put up so many trade barriers and they constantly invented new ones. Foreign companies were allowed to join the industry organizations, but only up to a certain point. There was a glass ceiling, but they could not be part of the important decisions. The tragically murdered Prime Minister of Japan, Abe-san, he asked these organizations, or actually he made them change this completely. Now your job is not to make it difficult to enter Japan. Your job is the opposite. Your job is to make it easy as possible for foreign companies to come here and compete with us and help us be stronger, help us learn. And also, of course, help the Japanese people to be more healthy. So I would just go out on a small tangent, and this is why I like Japan. It's one of the reasons. So that year when Prime Minister Abe was shot, do you know how many other people were shot to death in Japan that year? Think about it, it's 120 million people. 0 other people, that is correct. So 1 gun death in a whole year in that country. So it's a safe place. Okay. When it comes to regulatory support, the PMDA, the regulatory body, they have opened or are about to open an office in Singapore and in the US. Unfortunately, not in Europe. And these offices will simplify the way to take the initial contacts with the PMDA in your own language. So that is a good thing also. So the ecosystem is becoming increasingly collaborative in Japan. And for investors, and please don't ask questions about this because this is a jungle, but if you do it right, your profits from investing in biotech companies or biologics or whatever are tax exempt. So that means that Japan had a big hurdle before with lack of funding, but now it is the opposite. Funding is rife. Okay, next Japanese lesson, majide. This means sincerely or honestly, like you could say it really. And I like this slide. I took it from the internet. I looked for a long time to find this, but this is from an official Japanese organization under the government, and they put together some data. It's so boring if I say it. Just if you can read it, please do, and you can make your own conclusions. I will just be quiet. I just assume you have read it. Let's move on. So in Japan, there is a special verb called nomunication. And nomu is the Japanese word for drinking. And you know, communication is the English word for communication. So nomunication is how business is actually being conducted in Japan. So you have two kinds of meetings. You have the formal meetings where the Japanese will line up 5, 6, 7, 10 people at a table and you sit on the other side. The only things you talk about are the things you agree upon, the things that are good, creating harmony. So you should leave a formal meeting feeling good, like, yes, we are working on the relationship, we are doing things right. And what you never do in those meetings, you don't discuss contracts. You don't do like we want to do in the West. We put the pig on the table and we discuss it. No, never gonna happen. It is rude, it is barbaric. And so what they do instead is that usually I take this role for my clients. One person at the other side will be my counterpart. And we will go for coffee, for dinners, for drinking, and discuss the real issues. We don't agree upon you on this bullet point. We want to see it green. We want to do it in a different way. And we try to iron out the differences and the things that we need to have done. So those are the informal meetings. And that's where the real things happen. And usually the informal meetings are very easy to navigate because when you come to that point, I mean, the due diligence will continue, but it means they're interested in working with you. So it's a very positive atmosphere, even if we need to iron out things. And when it comes to strategy, you need to also have all these things that I don't want to talk about. Reimbursement, I mean, that is a key point. If you can't get a good reimbursement for your product, then it's going to be difficult, and maybe you should look at a different market. Distribution is another strategy that you need to figure out how to do it well, because it is not like you just go and knock on a door, hello, we need a distributor. They will do full due diligence on you, on your products, on your history. It takes at least 6 months, at least, usually 1 year, I would say. I won't talk about the market fragmentation, but yeah. What happens? Okay. So I like talking about the trends. So what I see in Japan, advanced modality pipelines, the number of pipelines in R&D and during clinical trials is just increasing. Every month there are new pipelines being put out there. And not only Japanese ones, also non-Japanese companies having their products out-licensed or working with a partner in a joint venture, whatever capacity. And there is also a large run for precision and personalized medicine. And maybe the most interesting trend is AI. I could talk at length about it. I will talk a little bit about it soon. And this is, I'll take this one first. So I will bring two cases. This is a case from a few years back. BioForum is a British biopharma manufacturing membership consortium. It's a long word. And they support the large manufacturing companies in the non-competitive space. They are not another advocacy group because all of their work is led by facilitators that are hired by BioForum. And they organize the big companies, subject matter experts in various fields. So they tried to get the Japanese companies to join, but it was very difficult because they were not there. So in 2 years' time, I helped fill up their sales funnel by working with the JBA, by working with important KOLs, and setting up seminar series, just everything. So in 2 years' time, I managed to get 3 paying customers. And to have a membership in one of their forums, the investment is around, depending on the forum, between $50,000 to $150,000 per year. So it's not a small investment. And I'm still good friends with them, even if I don't work with them. I think what they're doing is great. And so I just recently started working with an American consultancy called Ascensio. And they are in the space that is probably the most interesting for biopharma, the AI part, with an estimated CAGR of over 30% over the next 10 years or so. If it's true or not, we will see when we know. But at least the potential is there because there is so much work to be done. From automation to making every batch better than the previous batch when you're manufacturing. And they want to work with the Japanese pharmaceuticals. And so I'm helping them with that. And it is going to be a very interesting ride. I just started, so there is not so much I can say. I'm still learning the ropes. And for me, it's also a very good way to stay relevant, to have a new challenge, which is something I enjoy. Oh, and this word, maybe you all know it, arigato, means thank you in Japanese. And here you can click and get things. I will go back to the previous slide. I just wanted to show you the ninja dog. And with the ninja dog, I say thank you for you coming here and listening to me. Thank you very much. And I'm ready to take questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Stefan. So, any questions? Please, go ahead.
Between the Nordic culture and the Japanese culture.
Sorry, could I ask you to repeat the question now that you have the mic?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So the first question was how long you've lived in Japan for, and the other question was the main cultural difference between the Nordics and Japan.
So I've lived there for 18 years, 18, not 80, I'm not that old yet. But I think the differences are very many, but there are some very nice similarities. So we are a little quiet in the Nordics. We like to have consensus. We want to have we want to achieve good things rather than fast things. So those things, as we have them ingrained, it makes it easier to work with Japanese companies. And for instance, for American companies or Italian companies that have a little different lifestyle, it is more difficult. They have some challenges to iron out. When it comes to the differences, so Japan is extremely top-down, as in extremely. We like the flat organization way of thinking. And creativity is not at the top always, because you can have a meeting with the engineers and the boss, and the engineers say, yeah, green would be the best color because of this and this and this. And the boss said, I prefer red. Okay, everyone said, okay, then we do it red. So those are very difficult things. And I think the third one that also makes it difficult is the amount of time things take. even the smallest decision can take months. So as long as you prepare for this, you will be fine.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much for a great talk. You mentioned right in the first slide about 25 billion US from the Japanese state into biotech. How is that distributed into the ecosystem?
Oh, brilliant question. Everything hasn't been distributed yet, but one of the big things that they did and announced already at the get-go was that in order to prepare, you have a question coming up there later. In order to prepare for the next pandemic, because they're Japanese, they don't think if, they think when. And they were so slow to roll out vaccines. I mean, incredibly slow. They were like 1 year later than all the other modern countries. So they have decided that they will subsidize 90% of the cost for building dual manufacturing facilities. So they will have a number of facilities that are GMP approved and everything when it comes to vaccine manufacturing. And at the same time, they can manufacture antibodies, whatever it is they do. So when the next pandemic hit, they will just stop the current production and start vaccine production. So that is the first big thing that the money went to. The other big things that they went to create this greater Tokyo biocommunity, they need money. They're organized by the JBA, Japan Bioindustries. And there are also other projects, but now we're getting down to details. But these are the big things. They also have a biocommunity in the Kansai area called BioC. So Kansai, it's Osaka, Kobe, Nara, and Kyoto. That was a great question. Thank you.
So thank you very much for a really interesting talk. I was thinking on the step before, so you mentioned what you should think of in the formal meeting and the informal meeting. I suppose that is kind of when you, in our case, meet with a pharma partner at their site, for example. But when meeting at international conferences, for example, and there is quite a short time window where you have 20 minutes, 25 minutes, is there something in particular you would advise on in connecting or kind of in how to create this kind of harmony or during those really short meetings where you are on kind of international territory as well and just meeting the BDP people mainly?
Yeah. Thank you. That's also an interesting question, because when you're in international territory, no one can really claim that you should behave like I expect you to. But I also think that we should accept that since we want to work with them, they're the big guy and we're the smaller guy, we need to adapt. And I think we should think of them as we are invited to their living room and behave accordingly. Even if you're on a video call, dress business proper, be precise, be concise, be polite and formal. Especially in the first meetings, you need to be very formal to show respect. And when you do the things that they expect from the first meeting, as they would expect from a first meeting with a Japanese representative, if you do that, you have taken a long step towards a partnership. And then there are, of course, many other things that matter, if there is a product fit and everything, but you need to figure that one out later. So,
just kind of a follow-up question on that, because I've felt that especially with Japanese partners, it's a little bit more tricky being in women's health with vaginal infections, and quite often it's men on this other side from the Japanese companies, given this kind of respect thing, that as soon as we start to, I cannot really feel that I can ask them questions on how these products are used in Japan, for example. Is there something on kind of this, is this kind of going into the respect part?
No, don't even think about that, because they look objectively on your product from a scientific point of view and from a business point of view. And you should be candid with what you have. Just not really putting the pig on the table, but since they have read the presentation and know what you're talking about, be specific. And I would say that it is not a handicap to be a woman in Japan when it comes to doing business. It is a handicap if you want to have a career, but that's a different thing. They will listen to you as well as they will listen to any other person. Just know what you're talking about, focus on the science, focus on the business, and just be honest. It works. I know it feels strange at the beginning. I helped with what's it called? A device to understand when women are ovulating. So you had to insert it. And that was never going to be a hit in Japan because Japanese women will never want to insert anything except their husbands. Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you. That's all the time we have. But thank you so much for a great presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. It was great being here.
Great. Well, now we have our first company presentation of the afternoon, which is PharmNovo. And here to present the company is CEO Per von Mentzer. Welcome, Per.
Thank you so much. My name is Per von Mentzer, and I'm the CEO of PharmNovo, a clinical stage drug development company. Our vision is to improve people's quality of life through innovative, sustainable, and effective pain relief medicines. And I'm very pleased to be here today to present our company and our lead candidate, PN6047. Today, a phase 2 ready drug for neuropathic pain, as well as other chronic pain states, with clear first-in-class potential. In short, we develop quite novel drugs for neuropathic pain treatment. We have today a team with an extensive drug development experience. The lead candidate, as I said, has first-in-class potential, and we have exclusivity and patent protection in all major markets until 2041, and that includes the expected extensions. Following a completed phase 1, we are now targeting to move ahead into phase 2A proof of concept in neuropathic pain to be the first indication, and that to start by the end of 2024. And currently we are raising a Series A to finance these studies. Now, there is a huge unmet medical need for patients suffering from neuropathic pain, and neuropathic pain ruins these people's lives, both physically, socially, and many times even financially. It affects up to 10% of the adult population worldwide. And it's also a quite big burden for society. If we elevate the view a bit and talk about chronic pain, it's estimated to have a societal impact of some 300 billion euros annually. And neuropathic pain is a substantial part of that. Unfortunately, current treatments are only poorly effective and associated with severe side effects. What is commonly first-line treatments today is anti-epileptics, could also be antidepressants. So typically, a neuropathic pain patient coming to a pain physician, he would or she would be recommended to take pregabalin, for example. And here you have a lot of different challenges, and as I said, only poorly effective in maybe a third of the patients. If we look at market size, chronic pain market estimated to double in the next 10 years, 240 billion. It's one of the most underinvested areas, the pain segment in our market, and neuropathic pain represents some 10% of this. And the typical population we are targeting is patients suffering from the symptoms of allodynia and hyperalgesia. That's a quarter of this population in the neuropathic pain segment. So we believe we have a potential game changer in PN6047. It's the latest generation of a delta opioid receptor agonist. It's a DORA, and it very effectively reduces neuropathic pain in animal models. And specifically, most of these tests are actually testing allodynia and hyperalgesia, like the sciatic nerve ligation model. We have recently then completed a quite large phase 1 clinical study here in Sweden. And we've seen that it's fully safe and tolerable at exposure levels that we can predict to be effective in humans. So how does this work? Yeah. PN6047, as I said, is a delta opioid receptor agonist, so it activates the delta receptor. And the big thing here is that it's extremely selective. It's more than 100,000-fold potent on the delta receptor. So it basically doesn't touch the mu or the kappa receptor. And that's one of the unique parts. So we get the pain relief effects, but we basically completely avoid all the risks associated with touching the mu receptor. And on top of that, we have a downstream signaling, mainly through the G protein route. And that secures that we get the things that we want to see, which is pain relief, also some antidepressant effects, some anti-migraine and some anti-cough effects also in this. And we avoid tolerance and some other side effects, negative ones, that are primarily associated with the downstream signaling through the arrestin side. So the combination of this is the uniqueness of our small molecule that was developed by Bengt and the close team in the early days and selected to be the lead candidate. So taking a look at just one graph on potency, this is sciatic nerve ligation model, which is basically testing allodynia. Highly effective in allodynia in rodent models of neuropathic pain, oral dosing, and we have a very good effect in low milligram doses per kilo. And over 3 weeks of dosing, no analgesic tolerance seen at all. Same effect. The regulatory toxicology was super clean in rats and dogs. And we have also seen, as I said before, that we have a good safety and tolerability in the phase 1. This is kind of interesting. This is, again, then we were fully safe and tolerable in the phase 1. This is the average plasma concentration in the last MAD cohort, where we can see that we first of all have, I think I have a pointer, we have a steady state building up here after some 4 days approximately, and we have a average concentration level here, that's a top red dot line here of 157 nanomolar, translates to some 30 nanomolars in free fraction. And what is interesting is to compare with this line, where we have maximum efficacy in the rat SNL model at the concentration of 50 nanomolar, which is corresponding to some 1.5 nanomolar in free fraction. So we have a really nice therapeutic window of some 20 times here, which we can have as a conclusion coming out of the phase 1. As I said early on, we have other indications that are of interest, and one of the most recent that has built up, and that's built up through a collaboration with US partners, is opioid withdrawal syndrome, which is kind of interesting that we see potential to possibly treat opioid withdrawal with another kind of opioid. This is based on a collaboration initiated with 2 top universities in the US and funded by NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse. We've been running that preclinical program now for 1.5 years with quite promising results. And here we see 2 of the pain models that have been tested, 2 different hyperalgesia models, where we can see that in this one, we definitely bring down the pain significantly, and in this cephalic model, we completely bring down the withdrawal pain that has been caused after morphine. So this is a very interesting program that we are running, and NIDA has started to express potential interest to also be part of funding clinical studies in opioid withdrawal syndrome. Oops, sorry. So where we are now, as I said, we are raising funds to perform our phase 2A proof of concept study in neuropathic pain, and if capital is available, we will raise enough also to move into POC 2 and 3. And following a successful proof of concept, our target is to seek partnership with pharma for further development and commercialization of PN6047, and that either through a trade sale or out licensing. And a lot of current deals in the last couple of years indicate that a potential total deal value would be well above 500 million euros. We've built up our team quite significantly over the last couple of years, and especially, of course, in the clinical development side. So we have today both a project leader, Jesper Kjærulf, who has 20 years experience from Lundbeck and taking drugs all the way from discovery to market. He was project lead for Trintellix at Lundbeck with huge experience. And we also have a CMO today, a pain physician who's treating these patients every day, but he has industry background from AstraZeneca, 12 years in drug development in the pain field as well. All people in lead functions in our team have 20 to 30 years of drug development experience from pharma. So to sum up, PharmNovo and PN6047, our lead candidate, is a great investment opportunity. We target a huge unmet medical need in a strongly growing market. We have first-in-class potential. We can today say that PN6047 is safe and tolerable, also in humans. And we can conclude also that so far we have evidence that we are completely different to conventional opioids. And we also tested all the gold standards on abuse potential. There is no such thing associated with PN6047. We are phase 2 ready with a large therapeutic window to move forward. And last but not least, I would like to mention the team again. We have a team with more than 300 years drug development experience altogether, and the team is ready to take it forward and make it happen. Thank you so much. And there is a little bit of time if there are any questions here.
Exactly. Thank you, Per. There is indeed some time for some questions. I actually have a question. Maybe you could explain in a little bit more detail what is allodynia for those who might not be aware.
It's a good question. Sometimes when you use words, you don't think about that. It might be completely unknown, but that's actually pain on the skin from something that shouldn't be painful. So these patients, they cannot put on a shirt without extreme pain. And some of these people, they call us, of course, and I've spoken to quite a few because my telephone number is on our website. Some people have been suffering for 5-10 years and are basically living at home most of the time because they can't get dressed properly. Like they can't go to work, basically. Mm. So pain on the skin from something that shouldn't be painful.
Mm. How much of a, is there a psychological factor here? Because you often hear about pain that is sometimes more of a psychological effect rather than an actual, yeah. Thank you. Like a pain effect.
You might be touching the fact that there is, I mean, I'm not a scientist in that respect, but there is a close relationship between depression or anxiety, depression and pain. Mm. And sometimes you get circles in here. So people who are maybe depressed, they have a higher tendency many times to develop different kind of pains. Mm-hmm. And a pain patient definitely develops anxiety or depression. One of the last persons I spoke to that called in was almost suicidal after 10 years of this kind of pain.
Well, going back to allodynia, why is that your main focus here?
Oh, that's a really good question, because pain is is one of the most difficult areas in drug development, I believe. It's so subjective, difficult to measure. We don't have any clear biomarkers, etc. So in collaboration with our key opinion leaders, some world experts, we targeted to go for neuropathic pain and patients with allodynia and hyperalgesia, because there is ways of semi-quantitatively measuring this. So there are certain instruments you can use where you can put pressure on the skin, or you can also drag something on, and then you have a scale related to that pressure. So you could actually come a bit closer to defining what kind of pain level they have. So that's a strategic choice.
Yeah. So shifting a little bit, someone is curious about your exit strategy. If you could elaborate a little bit about that.
Yeah, as I said, we are targeting to team up with pharma. Would that not be possible to find the right partner straight after a proof of concept number 1? We will of course look into further development into phase 2B or so, but in general, this is a big pharma project. It's going to have a lot of different kind of challenges, of course, as always, but it's definitely going to be a very, very big development project. And we believe that we need pharma to be there and partner up.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions, but...
You have more?
There are a couple more.
Okay, yeah.
If somebody wants to during the break, they can...
Yeah, no, I'll be around all afternoon, so I'm happy to talk to anyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Per.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Great. Well, up next is Abliva, and here to present the company is Chief Medical Officer and VP Preclinical and Clinical Development, Magnus Hansson. Welcome, Magnus.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm Chief Medical Officer at Abliva, and Abliva's mission is to target the powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria, in order to improve the lives of mitochondrial disease patients. So these are my disclaimers. So I thought I'd start off with the investment highlights of Abliva. So we are targeting the underlying pathophysiology of the disease with a platform of compounds. We have a really attractive commercial opportunity. We actually have a pivotal trial ongoing with an interim readout coming up fairly soon. We just had a press release that the last data point for our interim analysis just happened this morning. And our first-in-class assets have a strong regulatory package and IP protection. So we have had some talks during these 2 days about going big, and we have a big ambition. We want to become a global leader in our field, mitochondrial medicine. And that is based on over 3 decades of research in mitochondrial medicine, but also long drug development expertise. So we're based here in Lund, but also in the US. Our CEO, Ellen Donnelly, is based in Boston. And we're a public company listed on Nasdaq Stockholm. So we actually have a great opportunity to serve an unmet medical need that is quite substantial in this field. There's nothing approved for mitochondrial disease. So we've focused, what do we need to do to be successful in this field? Well, first, we need to understand the disease, the pathophysiology. And you see a sketch here to the right. For our lead program, we are targeting the NAD plus NADH ratio, and that is a key driver of the energy deficiency that these patients develop. And that leads to a progressive organ dysfunction and disease deterioration. But it's equally important to understand the patient journey and what these patients experience. So we've had a number of interviews with patients, some under a formal setting. So we've had a qualitative interview study to develop one of our primary endpoints in the program. But we also had, of course, a lot of informal interviews. And last week, our chief investigator in our ongoing pivotal trial, Dr. Amel Kara, in a live event, she interviewed one of our patients, Regina, and I thought it's better to hear from her the experience of this disease, because her story is quite typical for the stories we hear. So I have a couple of short video clips from this.
So what led you to go to the doctors and to seek a diagnosis? What kind of symptoms were you experiencing 20 years ago?
Well, it wasn't so much the symptoms I had. I had a brother who was diagnosed with the disease. And at that point, I was made aware that all of his siblings had the gene. Okay. And looking at what he was dealing with and what I had experienced all my life, I realized I really should be checked for it because, you know, all my life I had been tired all the time. I couldn't do things other people did. I couldn't compete. I couldn't play sports because I just didn't have the energy. And I always wondered why they could do it and why I couldn't do it. Even when I had my children, I felt the same way. Why am I having such a hard time taking care of these children when other people can do it with such ease?
So Regina's story here is quite typical for our patient population. She has a mutation in her mitochondrial DNA, and that's passed on through mothers to the children. And most of her family members are actually more affected than she is, but she still has a very severe disease. She speaks about her debilitating fatigue and her muscle weakness, and it can be a little bit difficult to hear what she is saying because the muscle weakness has also affected her speech. So very typically, this energy deficiency from the deficient mitochondria causes a debilitating fatigue and a myopathy, so muscle involvement. That leads to a reduced quality of life, multisystemic complications, but also a reduced life expectancy. You can see that here on the graph to the left. So some that are severely affected die at a young age, but overall, you see that life expectancy is quite impacted. It's a rare disease, but it's not super rare. It affects about 1 in 5,000 individuals. So speaking about quality of life, I thought this section is also quite heartbreaking, actually.
I have 3 daughters. I have 3 daughters and a son. My 3 daughters will never have children. And they know they'll never have children because they don't want to be right into this world if they're not going to have any quality of life. And that's exactly what mitochondria is. It takes all your quality of life away. So the only grandchildren I have are through my son, and I have 2, a little boy and a little girl, but they won't let me take care of them. They won't let me spend time with them because because of my condition right now.
So Regina's story and other patients' story, of course, inspire us to do what we do, but it also helps us to focus our development programs. So this is an overview of our portfolio. I will focus on our lead compound, KL1333, where we have an ongoing phase 2 trial, but with a pivotal study design. So that should hopefully be the last placebo-controlled trial we need before seeking marketing approval. And we have orphan drug designation, fast track designation, and a strong IP of composition of matter patents. So even with quite conservative assumptions, we have a very attractive market opportunity, so sales opportunity for KL1333. So if we look at the number of patients in Europe and US, there should be about 40,000 patients. So with modest assumptions on market penetration and pricing, we'll still have an over $1 billion market opportunity. So looking at the clinical program, we of course listen to patients, but importantly talked to regulators repeatedly, but also payers. And what we found that aligned very well with the patient need is that we were looking at fatigue as one part of the clinical development program, and myopathy, the muscle weakness, as another part. And FDA has supported us to use them as alternative primary endpoints. So that means if either one of them is successful, that will be sufficient for a successful pivotal trial. And we actually had an opportunity to test this already in phase 1. So we had a small cohort, and we saw really promising signals of efficacy, both when we tested fatigue and the muscle function, as you can see in these two graphs. And what was also exciting was that the magnitude of change, if we compare to other diseases where there actually are approved treatments, that would be considered clinically meaningful. So we are right now in the middle of this phase 2 study that we call Falcon. So importantly, we have a very careful selection of patients during an extended screening period. We have almost 1 year of placebo-controlled treatment. And as I said, we have 2 primary endpoints, so 2 shots on goal. So just an hour ago, we sent out a press release that the last 24-week visit, the full study is 48 weeks long, but we'll base the interim analysis on 24 weeks of data. And that last patient visit happened this morning. So we started the study with recruiting 40 patients. That will come into an interim analysis that will be really important to de-risk the whole program, both when it comes to safety. Now we can show that we have 24 weeks of safety in this patient population, but also when it comes to the powering assumptions for efficacy. So we will have a conditional power reassessment of the final sample size. So we'll recruit up to 180 patients in total. So with that, I'd just like to ask you to join us if you would like to move forward to develop the first treatment for primary mitochondrial disease.
Thank you, Magnus. So I'd like to start out by talking about mitochondrial disease in general. It's you talk about a rare disease, of course. How much focus do you have to put on raising awareness for this type of disease in order to get, you know, any potential partnering going and deals going and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because most people, at least a few years ago, had never heard of mitochondrial disease. They may be familiar with mitochondria or the midichlorians from Star Wars. That is gradually changing, but it is of course important for partnering, but also as we start to think about the commercialization. There has been a radical improvement in diagnosis. So this has now become like almost a purely genetically based diagnosis. But still a lot of people go unrecognized. And we expect that, of course, to change when the first treatment becomes available. But that's something that, as we've started the second wave of the Falcon trial, we really need to work on that part to really make sure that the patients that we know are out there are properly diagnosed so we can reach them after we have our approval.
Well, speaking of that, how difficult is it to recruit patients for a trial like this?
I mean, it can be really difficult for rare disease, and we were aware of that, but almost surprisingly, the recruitment rate in this first wave was exactly as we had predicted. So that was a very nice surprise. So we are confident that we will be able to recruit this final part of the study in a timely manner. And I think that also shows that our assumptions on how common these genetic changes in this disease is correct, because we identified actually 91 patients that were screened for the study, but since we're quite selective, only 40 of them were randomized.
And speaking of the Falcon trial, the interim analysis is coming up soon. What sort of preparations are you going through right now for that?
Yeah, so here it's really important that we have really accurate and quality control data. So with this last visit happening today, we will make sure that all data is source verified. We have monitors going out to all the sites. So now we need to make sure that that final data is clean and proper, and then analyzed correctly for an independent data monitoring committee that will look at this data.
Mm-hmm. And someone in here is curious about your best estimate of a launch date for 1333.
That's a good question, but I can't really address it because I don't know what the final study size will be. But if you look historically how the duration it took about half year to recruit these 40 patients. Then we will expand the number of sites and countries for this second wave, and we'll recruit up to a total of 180 patients. And then it's, of course, a one-year trial. So I think you can do the math and estimations based on that.
All right, do some math, everybody. Well, we're here at the Global Forum. You talked about other countries that you want to go into. Could you maybe be a bit more specific?
So our primary market is the US and secondary Europe. So that's also where we run the trial. Lately, it has actually been more. It's been easier to recruit in Europe. The US hasn't really come back from the disturbances from the COVID pandemic, but we think that is changing. So right now we have been recruiting in 6 countries. We are looking to add at least 3 more, but also to expand to more sites in those countries. What's good with this rare disease is that it's often aggregated to certain expert sites. So in the US, for instance, there is a network of expert sites. So that's good both for running the clinical trial, but also, of course, for the next stage of market engagement and accessing that market.
Well, anyway, a lot of exciting things coming up for Abliva. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But thank you so much, Magnus, for your presentation. Great. Well, our next company presentation is from Ziccum, and here to present is CEO Ann Gidner. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you very much. My name is Ann Gidner. I'm the CEO of Ziccum. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to present our technology platform. We have a technology platform addressing biopharmaceuticals in general, the mRNA more specifically, creating tremendous value. We are enabling groundbreaking innovation. We have right now a revolution in the pharmaceutical industry, you can say. There's a new era because of the mRNA platform. This new technology, you can address previously undruggable genes. You can just code a genetic code to treat any kind of disease. This is opening up entirely new possibilities across indications. However, this platform comes with significant limitations. This is a quote from an analytical report that this platform really needs advancement in delivery and in stability. That's when it can be applied broadly across industry. And this is what we do in Ziccum. We have a technology which is unique. It's a disruptive technology where we are enabling drug delivery and we are solving all the stability issues for biologics in general and for mRNA more specifically. And right now we have generated extensive data, externally validated repeatedly, and it's excellent data as well. I will show you a quick picture of this. So what is this industry need? We are turning liquid biologics into thermostable dry powder. So going from these super fragile COVID vaccine doses, for example, in mRNA-based vaccine has to be treated cryogenically, minus 80 degrees, as everybody heard of during the pandemic. Taking that to a robust, simple, easy-to-use dry powder form with perfect properties. It sounds quite simple, but this is creating very, very significant value. First of all, you can improve the current treatment management of drugs. Existing drugs or new drugs, obviously you get thermostability, you can crack the entire cryogenic chain with enormous savings. You have an enormous sustainability gain, which is a key challenge in pharma industry today. We have to address the sustainability and the carbon footprint, which is gigantic for vaccine campaigns. But on top of that, with our technology, you can enable completely new treatments. And this is the biggest value. Completely changing the cost level. You can address completely new indications to target these undruggable genes. Also usability, patient friendliness. We can enable completely new delivery forms such as inhalation. And we are currently working on, we have very good readouts on excellent particle engineering to give perfect inhalation. I also have a cliffhanger, which will come later in the presentation. So on the high value side, there's a third component, which is news. And then on the more practical side, if you would be able to dry your drug by an old school technology, we can still provide significant cost savings, thanks to high yield and low operational expenses. Just quickly looking at existing technologies. The old school, low-tech method is lyophilization. It has a lot of shortcomings. It's difficult to apply for biologics. It's very difficult to apply for mRNA. As the whole industry has gone to spray drying. And this is a far more engineered process. As a chemical engineer, I can like all these well-defined steps with good process control and so on. But it's far too harsh for biologics. It only works for small molecules. It has numerous mechanical stress factors and a very harsh temperature stress, obviously, because you dry at plus 80 degrees, perhaps. So it's important to understand we have a completely different technology based on a completely unique principle. So what is this principle? Laminate-paste. We are drying biologics by mass transfer. In years of development, we have enabled to make mass transfer work instead of heat transfer, thus reducing the solvent in a very efficient drying process, only taking seconds. So each molecule is only exposed for a few seconds before it's dried. Practically, it's a module rig we have developed for plug and play. So a module ready to be implemented in existing facilities. So really an easy step to take to gain enormous upsides. We as a company, we're operating 3 pilot suites currently here in Lund. We are running paid feasibility studies, so we take assignments. We are working with big pharma and with very interesting biotech companies. The technology consists of both formulation knowledge and then drying technology together. And this is a technology licensing business model. We have tested this for all kinds of biologics. It's working for everything. Here you can see proteins, peptides, enzymes, antibodies, viral vectors, more vaccine types. Currently, we are focusing strategically on mRNA in LNPs because that's the most fragile entity. It's the most expensive entity. It's the highest value, really, implementing this change. But this is only the top of the pyramid or the peak of the iceberg. We can go forward and establish more markets with lots of other entities. And this is my cliffhanger. This is something we are investigating very intensely right now, because here we have a potential 4th big value inflection point, that we are not only preserving the activity when we are treating mRNA, we are even increasing it when we have been able to optimize the lipid composition. So we have excellent scientists trying to keep up with all the development in LNP composition. That is a big race in industry now with the mRNA revolution. And we have repeatedly, we can create several different modalities where we can increase the activity with our treatment. And this is, of course, an even bigger value inflection point here. Just one more slide on data readouts. We have created lots of data during 1 year. One of the milestones is in vivo data. So we had a very good local Lund CRO performing an in vivo study for us. Fluorescent mRNA coding was perfectly expressed in these trials, 2 different animal models, and we had excellent preservation of activity here. Very quickly on major milestones. So we have proven the platform extensively for mRNA, like mentioned. We have business milestones. We are signing agreements with big pharma and big biotech companies to run paid feasibility studies. We have readouts from one of these with excellent validated results from our partner. We have the in vivo results. We have a very ambitious effort to model the technology in a digital environment. Because this is a unique technology, it would take years or even decades to develop if we didn't speed it up. So we have implemented a very ambitious program to do 3D development of the technology. And we now have this model built, so we can now generate digital data in addition to physical readouts. It's also very important to secure intellectual property, since we are a licensing business model. And we have secured a very significant amount of intellectual property now. We went in with 3 large PCT patent applications just now in April. So this is nicely completed now. Market potential and plan ahead, finally. The business model is licensing, like I said. Currently, we have started being revenue generating in 23 with paid studies. When we get to license stage, we will have milestones and royalties. Speaking of market potential, I said a lot about mRNA already. There is a revolution for a number of very good reasons. And here is also an overview of the tremendous race in industry currently. All these companies who want to get into the field, start mRNA projects, create vaccines. It's all the existing vaccines players, it's all the big pharmas, and there's hundreds of biotechs racing in this field. So we consider our addressable market very significant. If we just look, we can treat all kinds of biologics, but just looking at the mRNA section of RNA, there's a market predicted now to grow from $40 billion to $60 billion per year, and we count on a royalty with low one-digit numbers. So very conservative on that, and adding 2 more vaccine platforms. We would have an addressable market now for 600 to 1.8 billion US dollars per year. And this is just Western world. Roadmap, we have made great progress building the company and securing top-tier partnerships. We are taking our master plan forward, and we are taking the 3D modeling project forward. Right now, it's very important to execute on the paid studies. But what we want to do now is to secure further partnerships, because there's so much interest in industry. So investment we are looking for is really to expand our organization and to expand our pilot capacity as well. And then there's a few slides here just on the company. We are based here in Lund. We're a public company listed at Nasdaq First North. I'm the CEO. I have a very long background in leadership roles in large corporations, mainly based in the US and in Germany. And we have a terrific board of directors. There's an update here because we had our AGM yesterday, so we have a new chairman of the board, but we couldn't disclose that until today. And then before I thank you, I want to say I'm staying here for the rest of the day to answer questions. I also have my colleague, Christo Vassilev, our finance manager. We will be very happy to answer your questions and discuss further. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ann, for that presentation. Just a couple of questions here. What are your expectations for the long-term impact of the laminar pace feasibility study?
The long-term impact?
Yeah.
The feasibility study is the first step in the dialogue with the partner. So that's the proof of concept. After that, we typically will optimize the applicability for one specific application. And then it's the negotiation of a term sheet for a license.
Yeah. And speaking of partnering, you mentioned that here towards the end. Could you tell us a little bit more about your partnering strategy?
Indeed. We have a very good outreach. We have built a name very quickly in industry. We take part in really fantastic forums. There's the mRNA Leadership Summit, for example, twice a year, one in Europe and one in the US. There we have the most important and most keen players to develop mRNA projects. So that's where we pick up really excellent dialogues. strategically, we are targeting the people with the most vulnerable modalities, right, who really need to change something. Another important target segment is inhalation companies, where we have them perfect particle engineering offering. So you can change, just in lyophilization, for example, you cannot tweak anything. You cannot guide what you want to achieve. But with laminar paste, you can get a perfectly formed morphology for efficient inhalation. Yeah.
And in terms of regional markets, are there some that you will focus on more than others?
No, we address Western world pharma, So it's Europe, US, and Japan, mainly. I really enjoyed the Japan introduction we got here.
Yes. You mentioned the fact that RNA has the highest value in terms of biologics. Why is that?
It's a very expensive production process, right? And then you have this super complicated spherical particle of lipids that has to like each other, right? And they are free floating in water, right? So it's very, very difficult to change that status. And that's why, and they're so fragile, they have to be treated at -80 normally, right? That is expensive.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Let's see here. I have time for one more question. So someone is asking, what milestones do you anticipate to achieve within the next 2 years? What main milestones?
That's a good question. It will be very, very important time, the next 2 years here. I think a more general milestone is to add more partners on several platforms, not just mRNA, because I shouldn't overstress the mRNA field, right? Because we do have partners for other modalities. So broadening the pipeline, that's the first step. And the second key value inflection point is really to land our first licensing agreement. Yeah.
Well, great. We look forward to that. And, thank you so much, Ann, for your presentation again.
Thank you.
Next company presentation is Reccan, and here to present the company is CEO Malin Bornschein. Welcome, Malin.
Thank you. I am Malin Bornschein, CEO of Reccan, and it's my pleasure to be here to tell you about our progress when it comes to pancreatic cancer diagnostics. Our mission is to save lives by improving the prognosis through earlier diagnosis. And why is that mission so important? About 500,000 new cases of pancreatic cancer occur globally. Almost as many die every year. At the time of diagnosis, the prognosis is really poor, and less than 10% survive 5 years. Early symptoms are inconclusive, and for 85% of the patients, the diagnosis comes too late, when it's no longer possible to resect and cure. It's not the most common cancer form, 10th or 12th, depending on the country. But it is in Finland already the second most common cancer-related cause of death. And it's predicted to become so also in the US before 2030. So these are really horrible numbers, but they are only numbers. For us at Reccan, this is personal. We have all friends and family who belong to those numbers. So we are committed to make this change. And specialists, oncologists and surgeons all over the world agrees with us that there is an urgent need for a better diagnostic method. So we have imaging techniques. They can detect pancreatic cancer fairly early, not very early. But they are not suitable for testing at scale because they are very labor intensive. And then we have blood markers that are very suitable for testing at scale. But CA19-9 came in the 80s. is not allowed to be used for diagnosis in most countries because it fails to detect about 15% of the true cases. Newly developed cell-free DNA tests, they are even worse. They are detecting about 60% of the true cancer cases. So we need new diagnostics. There are several different patient groups that are relevant here. Here are some of them. We have patients with increased risk, hereditary increased risk of developing pancreatic cancer. They quite often get the cancer a lot earlier than the normal cancer patients. And they are supposed to be followed up, ideally several times a year. But lack of efficient means of following up means that we see a surgeon, not me, might see them once a year. And that's not often enough because we know that pancreatic cancer can go from stage 1 to stage 4 within 4 to 6 months. It needs to be done a lot more frequently. Then we have a huge patient group, new onset diabetes patients. They are not followed up at all due to the fact that efficient means of screening is lacking. Based only on these 3 patient groups, we have a total serviceable market in Europe and US alone of 4.3 billion euros. We've identified, through years of hard work within Lund University, 5 blood markers that are really good at determining if a patient has pancreatic cancer. A perfect diagnostic test would have an AUC, area under curve, of 1. That would mean that they will never miss a patient, and they would never diagnose a patient false positively. Thanks to COVID, it is now common knowledge that those tests do not exist. There are no such thing as a perfect diagnostic test. But ours come really close. We have in repeated studies showed that when we compare pancreatic cancer patients with healthy individuals, we have an area under curve of 98.4 to 99.6. That's really, really high. We've taken those markers and developed Reccan immunoassay. It's an assay based on these 5 patented biomarkers specific to pancreatic cancer. We've also developed a software. The test and the software are both optimized for analyzers that are already installed at clinical laboratories all over the Western world. This means that implementing our test can be done without any capital investment and without changing the put in place clinical routines. It's a very low threshold for implementation. We have finalized the development. We've performed rigorous analytical performance testing, and we've done a clinical trial of 500 patient samples. That is now being analyzed, and that data is going to be used to go into a larger cohort. We're super excited about this. Next time you hear me talk, I will present those results. Already looking forward to it. We will have our CE mark technical files done this year, CE mark next year. While waiting for that CE mark, we're going to use this clinical data to talk to patient organizations, to talk to surgeons, to talk to oncologists, to make sure that we are ready for the launch and that we can get even more clinical data with our collaboration partners. Through our founders, we are very well connected with specialist surgeons and oncologists all over the world. But our network grows denser the closer to Lund that we get. So initially, with our launch plans, we're going to focus on the Nordics. That's close to home. We know everyone. There are only 20 centers that we will address. Then we have a very specific markets, both public and private in Europe, that we're going to target next. And for a potential launch in regulatory and reimbursement-wise more strict markets like US or UK, we are going to need further investments. We've already secured a runway that is going to take us through Q1 2025 and the completion of our technical files. Then we're going to raise additional 2 million euros so that we can continue with our planned European launch. For a launch in the US and UK, we are going to need additional funding and also a strategic partnership to be doing that efficiently. To recap, we have a test that can find pancreatic cancer earlier and more accurately than what's possible today. There's a very low threshold to implement, since we can keep the clinical pathways that are used today, and we don't need any capital investments. We have health economic data showing that for risk groups, this is an economically efficient method of surveillance. In addition, we have next generation projects. So on an academic level, we are looking to our markers and friends, what they can do when it comes to efficiency in establishing treatment, efficiency, and surveillance after treatment. We also have a point-of-care test that is built to replace a diabetic center that is under development. But this is sort of our dreaming slide. We have more dreams. We're showing just a couple of them for you now. Between us, we have 50 years experience of surgery and research when it comes to pancreatic cancer. Really close collaboration with the university, as you can see from our next generation projects. And we have about 150 years experience on development and marketing of life science products. This is a brilliant bunch. We are all very committed, and we have a strong sense of urgency, because we know that the very day that our test becomes available, it can also start saving lives. I hope that I have been able to transfer some of that sense of urgency to you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm happy you've been listening, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Great presentation. So you talk about the importance of early detection, right? But a lot of people will ask, well, what does early mean exactly? You alluded to it, but could you be a bit more specific?
Yes. So early we would define stage 1 or 2, and that more or less means that we can still resect. If you find a cancer in stage 3 or 4, if the cancer has been spread locally or for instance, to the liver, all you can do is make the patient more comfortable. You have no chance of saving that patient.
Well, this question is related to that. Given the aggressiveness of pancreatic cancer, is it really feasible to save lives, or are you really aiming to prolong life?
When it comes to cancer, we normally count lives in 5 years. None of us will be happy with that, but that's how we count it. So it is to have. We know that by finding these cancers earlier, we can increase the number of 10% that survive 5 years to around 50%. So data showing between 40 and 50% would survive if found early enough, and then you normally don't follow patients more than 5 years. So that's sort of what we have to measure with.
And again, related to this, given often the diffuse symptoms, who will know to test early on? What is the trigger to use your test?
Yes. So one of the most important groups would be the hereditary ones. That's patients who have 2 close relatives or a mutation that makes it known that they are in a high risk. And statistically, they get the diagnosis 10 years earlier. So here we're not looking at 60 years old, we're looking at 50 years old, maybe 40 years old. It's a really important patient group to take care of. So that's one. And then new onset diabetes. Quite often, if you're above 50 years of age and you get a new onset diabetes, a certain percentage, it's between 1 and 3% in different studies, has a pancreatic cancer as well, and needs to be followed up for a certain period of time. So those are the easiest one. Then, of course, also early symptoms, but that's way trickier.
Yeah. Shifting a little bit to in terms of geographical markets, what are you aiming for? You mentioned a couple, but could you be a bit more specific?
I don't want to. No, I can say we have 4 different countries in Europe that we're aiming for, and where we have their way of introducing diagnostics to the market, and or how they are working with public versus private diagnostics make them really interesting for us. And then we, of course, also building a lot on where we have the strongest relationships. That's also an important part for where we will choose to start.
So from your perspective, what needs to be done now in order to make your technology a standard in the clinic?
We just need to keep on going the way we are doing. We're on track and have a solid plan.
Let me see here. We have time for maybe one more question. You talked about your dreams. So, this is a bit related maybe to the last question, but how do you envision making those dreams come true?
So if we're really dreaming, super dreaming now, then our panel would not only be able to find these patients early enough, but we also have a case of about a third. We have the same harsh treatment for any cancer patient, and it's really harsh. Some patients die from the treatment, and if our markers would also be able to be a guidance to the kind of treatment that you should get. But now we're dreaming. That's dreaming. That would be absolutely amazing. We would save both suffering and money. That would be amazing.
Great. Well, let's hope those dreams come true. Thank you so much. It was great to listen to your talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. The next company presenting is Hamlet BioPharma, and here presenting is CEO Catharina Svanborg.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. When we came in, they were playing Take a Walk on the Wild Side. I like that music choice a lot. So Hamlet BioPharma is an innovative company that I actually was part of starting. I'm not the CEO, I'm the founder and chairman of the company. Hamlet BioPharma is a highly innovative company that, and I don't have this thing, here we go. Working with 2 indications, cancer and infections. We have a broad pipeline of more than 15 projects, 60 patents, and we are focusing on 3 projects that are in phase 2 trials. Alpha-1H for bladder cancer, and an IL-1 receptor antagonist that we are testing for bladder pain and for recurrent acute cystitis. Our way of working is to define mechanisms of infection, precise mechanisms of infection, and to decide drugs that interfere with those mechanisms. And we have our scientific identity, we have our scientific lab ongoing and in symbiosis with the drug development platform that we have developed. And the success of that, as I said, is shown by these 3 projects that are in clinical trials and by a rich pipeline of very interesting molecules. So recently, Hamlet BioPharma completed a successful financing round. We raised about almost 50 million through a rights issue, and we are really proud that this was completed without warranties and without convertibles. So due to crucial backing from our long-term shareholders and the addition of a large number of new shareholders, we were actually able to get the money. Wow. And then the market's positive response following the rights issue is also something that we are, of course, extremely happy about. So the company is visible, what our work is visible, and hopefully we can reach the goals that we have set out to reach. So for bladder cancer, the key molecule, alpha-1H, is a molecule that kills tumor cells very quickly. We published last fall a combined study of patients with bladder cancer, the two populations, and calculated the combined treatment results. We have also done a dose escalation study, which means that we have two concentrations, and the response rate was 82% of the tumors treated with a higher dose and 45% of tumors treated with a lower dose, which of course is our very good numbers for bladder cancer. So we also have received very good news from the FDA. Our IND was granted last summer, and in November we received fast track status from the FDA. And for a small company, this is a big event. We have been collaborating with a partner in the US who are the spokespersons with the FDA for several years. And by systematically following the advice, we have been able to place our portfolio qualitatively and quantitatively in such a position that this is now possible. And we are proceeding towards phase 3 trials in dialogue with the FDA. So the clinical studies in summary for bladder cancer, we've completed a placebo-controlled study and a dose escalation study, as I said, and we have an ongoing study to examine more details about the future phase 3 trial protocol. The results are no drug-related safety issues, which I think is very unusual for a cancer compound. And as I said, the combined data analysis and the numbers. The top panel here shows you the increase in effect with increasing dose, the reduction in tumor size. I think you can appreciate the uptake. The red color here is the uptake of drug by the tumor. It targets the tumor very efficiently. And the green color here is apoptosis, which means that the tumor cells in the treated patients are dying by apoptosis. As you know, this is a non-toxic form of cell death, and we're very interested in this mechanism. We've also added news recently about another mechanism of the anti-tumor effect of alpha-1H, and this is the immune response. So there is a rapid and effective immune response to the tumor in patients treated with alpha-1H. So in addition to killing tumor cells and inducing tumor cell shedding, alpha-1 also activates a broad immune response with a strong protective potential against the cancer. Another aspect of this response, which is quite interesting, is that it resembles BCG. BCG are mycobacteria. They are the drug of choice for bladder cancer. You inject them into the bladder of the patient, and the immune response builds up, and the immune response rejects the tumor. So this is something that the field is used to, the urology field is used to treating with BCG. Now, if we compare the immune response to our compound and BCG from literature studies, you can see this huge overlap. All of these cytokines, all of these immune response parameters are regulated both by our drug and by BCG. And there are some additional cytokines that are regulated by the higher dose of our drug. Comparing the pattern here of activation, our activation pattern, very, very significant values compared to placebo. All of this is compared to placebo. And then the literature studies of BCG, you can see the great symmetry between those two. And of course, that's very interesting because it suggests that our non-toxic compound is able to mimic many of the aspects of BCG, which has a lot of side effects associated with it. I would also like to mention a little bit about our studies in the infection and immunomodulation field. We all know that antibiotics are not as efficient as they should be, and that other approaches are needed. There are lots of attempts to make more antibiotics, but that's not our approach. Our approach is to use the immune system of the host, to strengthen it in such a way that it can get rid of the infection, and at the same time have less inflammation. Sounds impossible, but actually it works. So I mentioned before that we are working with the IL-1 receptor antagonist to do immunotherapy in 2 indications. One is bladder pain syndrome, and the other is recurrent acute cystitis. So bladder pain syndrome is a relatively rare, but affecting about 0.1% of the global population. This disease causes severe chronic lower urinary tract symptoms. The patients are kept awake at night. It's difficult for them to hold a job or to have a family life. There are no treatments available long term. Morphine is the gold standard, or to remove the bladder by surgery. So this is a very special group of individuals with a very difficult handicap. Of course, acute cystitis is the opposite. This is what every other woman has at least once in her life, and many women have recurrent cases of these infections. There is really no good alternative to antibiotics. So I'd like to show you some data for the bladder pain study, the phase 2 study that we are now conducting. The data is from an earlier publication, but I think it illustrates our point. So we see a reduced pain score in those patients. We see an increased quality of life. And we also see a reduction in pain molecules. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we have objective measures, molecular measures, that indicate the response of the patient to treatment and the reduction of pain that actually could serve as potential biomarkers in the future. And significant effects of this treatment were detected in the majority of patients. So the phase 2 study is ongoing, and we are very optimistic about these outcomes. There is also the question about antibiotics and antibiotic resistance. I'm not showing you mouse data because the clinical data, oops. Oh, no, I'm not. I apologize for that. So in summary, successful round of financing that we are very proud of. New clinical data for 2 indications, bladder cancer and bladder pain syndrome. We have also landed a large-scale drug production contract. We are now in the kilogram range in terms of GMP drug production, continuing the FDA process. We are looking at strategic alliances and commercial collaborations very actively. And also we've increased our activity with investor relations and media presence. I think this is one of the reasons why we were successful with the funding round. And we have a rich pipeline of discoveries. And I'll just show you some examples here. Of course, there are other indications for alpha-1 and for Hamlet, brain tumors, colon and rectal cancer, oral cancer. These are indications that we are looking at, but not actively in clinical phase. We also work with a molecule that's very interesting. It's called an RNA Pol2 inhibitor. It doesn't say anything, doesn't tell you anything. Think of the microbiome. Think of nice bacteria producing good things for the body. We've looked at that a long time ago. Now we're at the stage when we can actually purify molecules from these nice bacteria and use them as drugs. And the effects in animal models are amazing. We also have competence, some of it in our room, where we actually can see the mechanism exactly in a lock and key situation, where we can say exactly how this works. So I'm really looking forward to the continued development of this group of molecules. And we have additional projects in the pipeline. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Catharina, for your presentation. Very good presentation.
Thank you. It's fun to talk about things that go well.
I'm curious, why was bladder cancer chosen as the first indication for your lead candidate?
That's really interesting, and it's important to mention. It's a name that I should have mentioned anyway. A urologist, Björn Wult, who he's been working with the lab scientifically, got his PhD with us, and so on. And when he saw the data on acute cystitis in the animal model, he was thinking about which patient group should we choose. You know, always this question: which is the right patient group? And he thought of those who had the worst situation. Why don't we start with those? And it turned out that his judgment was perfect. So that's due to him.
Is the US your primary focus? Why or why not?
The FDA was our primary focus. This has been almost like a fixed idea for us that we've been very cheap. We've come all this way with quite little money, and part of that, I think, is because we are trying to be strategic. So for me, there was a need of a third party out there to tell us what to do instead of us trying to second guess. So this FDA contact has been part of that. It doesn't mean that we have funding to do clinical trials in the US, not at this point, but of course a good dialogue with the FDA might enable that in the future.
What is your exit strategy? How do you plan to achieve it?
Well, what we say and what we believe is that we would like a partner that has the muscles and competence to take this on. We are very happy to discuss our investors and their exits because it's close to our heart. But our strategy is to keep the drug going and to get it as far as possible towards the market.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Shifting towards the immunotherapy.
Yes.
Is immunotherapy becoming the new standard for combating bacterial infections and antibiotic resistance, or should it become the new standard?
I wish. I mean, we've been working with this for a while, and there are very elegant studies by co-workers and in the lab who have published in excellent journals, really showing how strong these effects are. And I mean, they are very motivated to take this on. It's sort of a non-conventional thing in that most of you believe that if you inhibit the immune response, you get more sick, right? So people who have many infections, they usually have some deficiency of the immune response. What we're looking at is the overreactivity of the immune system. And I think after COVID, you all understand that, right? You get too sick. You get sick because you have too much immunity. And this is the one that we put in the lid on, not the one that you need for your normal defense. I really believe in this. I wish there was more activity in this field, really.
And final question,
yeah.
As founder of the company.
Thank you.
What was your vision when you founded the company, and would you say you've reached that vision?
Yeah, first of all, everything is many people. And the reason we founded the company was because we realized that a piece of human milk was killing tumor cells. And there were several people involved from the start. I was thinking that if we just get to the point where we have something from the FDA, then we will be credible, you know? Then the rest of the development will go by itself. And there is a lot of attention around us at the moment, so we will see if we were right. But we made it so far. I think that's fun.
That's great.
That's great, well, yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Catharina.
you, and thanks for your nice questions. Appreciate it.
All right, we have our last company presentation for the day, and it's Diagonal Bio, and I'd like to welcome to the stage CEO Wehlin.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, maybe. And thanks for staying. I will present to you Diagonal Bio and the diagnostic instrument. I need this one. I start with a quote from Nature in March 2020, so you know roughly where we are. So every single time we have an outbreak, we're one step behind, in that we don't have a rapid diagnostic to detect that new organism. And Diagonal Bio can actually offer this market the fastest, rapid, and most accurate instrument in analyzing this one. And who am I to claim that? I am the CEO of Diagonal Bio since a couple of months ago. And I have 25 years of management teams or leadership teams, whereof 18 as CEO in life science companies. I've also founded a company called Equal Pharma, which is on Spotlight Next. So I have some experience with me, at least. Existing solutions you all came across, I'm sure. The PCR instrument and the PCR test. We needed to take samples. It was sent to central labs. They analyze it. You get the answer back in best case, 24 hours, but normally at least 48 hours. That's too slow. What happens with the spreading of the infection during this time? It needs a laboratory-trained personnel, staff. You need to send it logistics. It's quite an expensive instrument. So the existing tools is the PCR, but it's also very accurate. You shouldn't forget that. It's accurate, we can trust it. The other alternative we had during the pandemic was the self-test. It's cheap, you don't need to be laboratory trained, but can you actually trust the result? Lots of discussions in conferences, in meeting rooms, what result did you get? Can we trust that? Are you contagious or not? So these are the two outliers here, I would say, in the spectra. They're also gene specific, so the self-test is only targeting one marker. There are multiplex in the PCR, but it's still very expensive, and mostly in central labs, it's just one genetic marker. So in 2020, 3 guys here in Lund said there must be another solution to this. We must be able to be accurate and fast. So Diagonal Bio was founded in 2020, and we now have 2 product lines. We call it Lamplify for the less regulated markets, and we call it Panviral for the regulated markets. So that's for the human diagnostics. It is fast, it is accurate, it's cheap, you don't have to be laboratory trained, and it's a point of contact. We don't need to have to send any samples anywhere. We can directly, after 10 minutes, tell, yes, you have, or no, you haven't. We have 8 channels in our instrument. We can have multiple genetic markers, or we can have multiple patients for one marker. So how can I claim that this is accurate, and what is the biggest differences? The PCR is, as I said, central labs. We send them there. They need to purify the sample before even starting analyzing it. They need to add fluorescence, which can be toxic and cancerogenic. They need to cycle the heating a couple of times before they're ready to do the analyze. And that takes approximately 3.5 hours. We don't need to purify. We take the sample, we lysis it, and then we can read the result and run the machine. We add enzymes and primers as they do with the PCR, but we don't use any toxic or cancerogenic. We have an isothermic heating, which means in a couple of minutes we have reached 65, 67 degrees, and that's it. And in 10 minutes we have the result, and the exactness here of this instrument is depending on the electrochemical detection. So we are actually reading the electrons that's moving, and the footprint of those electrons tells us if this is positive or negative result. So we combined a LAMP technology with electrochemical detection, and that's the clue to being accurate and fast. So can I claim this? Yes, I can. DTU has made, the Danish Technical University has made external validation on this in their lab. We have been compared to PCR with a number of samples, and we can conclude that we have a 98% correlation to PCR. And as the former speaker said, there is no exact, there's no 100%. So 98 is quite well compared to the PCR. And best time, 8 minutes, 47 seconds. I can do with 10 minutes as well. The other trials we've done, a couple of them, but we've done with the University Hospital here in Skåne, and that was on multiple genetic markers. And to see that, yes, we can actually combine different genetic markers, and we can get the positive or negative results from that as well, in the same time frame. So it's not only the result that's been quite fast from the instrument, it's also the company development as such. It was founded in 2020 with a blank paper. We had, the idea they had was to combine this LAMP and the electrochemical detection. There was a listing of the company in 2021 at Nasdaq First North. There was a patent granted in the EPO at 2022. In 2023, we got the CE marking of Lamplify, which means that we actually can address a market already. And that means that our patents are extended all the way to 2041 to cover this combination of technologies. We've also patented and design protected the channels that we use in the machine. So that is a consumable for the user, and it must be our channels, that the cartridge that they use. So the markets that we can address with the Lamplify is the one you see with agriculture, food and water, animal diagnostics, and also research use only. Human diagnostics is for the pan-viral, and that will take some time because that's another process to go through with that. But everything we gain now in results with the Lamplify can be put back in the pan-viral as well. All data we get in is good data. We have then chosen to focus on animal diagnostics. We're a small company, a small organization. We can't be all over the place. So we got some traction from not the cow and not the cat, not to start with. We have questions from them, but we actually started to build the genetic portfolio around respiratory viruses in horses. That's a niche market, it's a premium market, but we're also working on a volume market in parallel with this. But the traction came from the horses. And there are 3 viruses, they vaccinate for that. There's one that the vaccination doesn't work, and that one is the worst one, because if the horses gets that one, they often needs to be put down. There was an outbreak at a big race in Valencia. They had a spread. They sent away the samples as they should. They got the result 48 hours later. The competition was over. The horse owners went home, and 10 horses were infected and had to be put down. These horses cost at least 5 million euros. So there are a lot of value to be saved by actually doing a quick sample, 10 minutes, isolate that horse or the 2, in order not to have this spreading of this one. As you saw on the previous slide, our test is $15 per test, and our competitors is around $90 per test. So if you have a horse worth 5 million euros or dollars, I would say that $15 is quite a good insurance. So milestones for 2024, we will have pilot installations. We have 3 at the moment, and the most prestigious one, I think, is with Lisa Lidbeck in Löderup, and she is a veterinarian in the International Ride Sports Association, so she is at several competitions worldwide. So we will continue with introducing Lamplify to the market and also in other segments. We will also create value by building our genetic portfolio. And then we have to hold back, unfortunately, the pan-viral for a bit with the human diagnostics. We will do a strategy for it, but we will not be able to implement it due to the resources that we have, quite limited. So it's a team of 4, and I'm one of them. So there are 3 more. So we can't be all over the place. We have a board, experienced board. We have Kerstin Jakobsson with experience from HemoQ, Tekato Foss, but also former CEO at Medicon Village. We have Kush. Kush is one of the 3 founders. So he's still in the board. He is in the board. And Edward, he is the CEO of BioExtracts. And I think that was 54 seconds over time. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the presentation, Karin. Very interesting. There's a couple of questions here about how you're able to keep costs so low.
I showed that on the last slide, didn't I?
Yeah, but especially considering you're using primers.
No, but it's actually it's possible to keep them low. The reaction mixes. To keep them low, we always start with synthetic genetic material. We try out that with our primers and design those. And then we also have a qPCR that we test, so we know that we're in the right range. And I think the team behind me, with the experience they have, and a couple of tools that we built in-house, keeps the costs down quite well.
Have you already gotten IVDR approval?
Nope.
Okay.
And that's the human diagnostic side.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a longer route, and that will require more resources.
Yeah. So going back to Amplify, why horses? Yeah, someone is asking.
Yeah, we got the first interest from Hørsholm in Denmark for testing that, and that was also due to he's also working a lot with competition horses, race horses, and sports horses, and found it intriguing that no one actually had taken this niche of accurate and fast detection. Because of competitions, horses from everywhere, extremely valuable, and no one trusts the quick tests, and they send it away, and this is the story that I told you. And I think that suddenly they had been scouting for different analytical tools, they haven't found anything, read about this one, and wanted to give it a go.
What is your marketing strategy for Amplify?
I think to start with we have to find good pilots with KOLs and people that actually can bring it internationally, talk about it, and mouth to mouth to start with. And that's, again, to keep the costs down.
Yeah. Could you please tell us about your capital need for the coming 2 years?
Yeah, I can do that. We did a fundraising now this spring, and we had 56% in guarantee over 30 million approximately, and got not more than that for the subscription. So it was a very expensive fundraising. We're working now on getting the traction from the market with the resources we have, and then we, as many others, would like to have the right investors with the long-term knowledge and also the long-term investor interest to follow the company, that we will need to raise more money.
And one last question, where are you in terms of preparing PanViral for the market?
As I said, we are at the moment looking at a regulatory strategy for PanViral to see where the gaps are between the ISO certification and what's required. Doesn't necessarily have to be IVDR. Then you immediately think about Europe, and then you have the FDA. There could be other routes. We are just trying to map where are we, where could we go, and what does our resources allow us to do.
Great. Well, thank you so much for answering the questions.
Thank you.
For the presentation. All right, so now we have the last show for this event, which is a panel discussion called Becoming Relevant for the US Market. And here to guide it is my colleague, Sonja Schwarzenberger.
This on. Okay, before we start, please, dear panelists, you can already take a seat. Fiona here, Suresh there, Philip in the middle. Okay, so before we start, this is the main event. You know, you want to be ready. No, I hope you had a really good time, and I think so for the last 2 days. But I just want to say, since we're going to be sitting down, I know you're super comfortable in this row, but if you want to see the beautiful faces and really feel engaged, I think you will have an even better view to the left and the middle. It's not mandatory, but I'm just giving you the last chance now to move without feeling any shame whatsoever for moving around. Okay, some people did. Okay, good. Have you got any water? We need to fix that before we start.
Yes.
Okay, so we're saved, or we're saving the stars and stripes for last, because, you know, that's why everyone is here, or so they tell me. But Because, I mean, seriously, wouldn't it be nice to feel like completely secure that you as a company are, or at least will be, relevant for the US market? I think so. Here to help us out are, to my left, Fiona Law, partner and patent attorney at Potter Clarkson, expert in protecting inventions by law. I mean, simply put, IP. Philip Siberg, you're CEO at Senzime, which makes medical devices and develops and sells them, in having operations in over 30 countries worldwide, including the US. And Suresh Pai, your CEO of LamaMed Solutions and managing partner at LamaMed Access, based in San Francisco Bay Area. You're a serial entrepreneur with numerous products launched in the US and multiple exits to publicly traded multinational strategic buyers. Very welcome, all of you. We'll start up light. Except for the money, why is everyone hoping to reach the US market? Fiona, you get to, I mean, whoever have an answer gets to answer, I think.
I know, except that you said except for the money, and that was going to be my answer. So, you know, it's half of the, it's over half of the world global market. Is there another reason? Should it not be first on everybody's? Is that a
either you make it there or you don't make it at all.
There we go.
Suresh, you have to share.
No, I mean, it's pretty obvious. I'm sitting in the U.S., so we always start there because that's what we know, right? And this is where we're facile because it's our country, right? So it's natural for us to go there first.
Okay, so Philip, this is going to be a learning experience for all of us here, I hope. What do you know now that you really wish you would have known when you first set out to put your product on the U.S. market?
You can't do business on the SK943. A lot of Swedes or Scandinavians, we take the Chicago flight for a week. We think, let's go to the US and sell my products. It's never going to happen. You have to go all in. And you have to go all in US. And the learning was we should have started earlier. We should have more money. And it's absolutely the right thing to do. But I think we are still naive Scandinavians on the challenges in the US market. But it's absolutely the right thing.
At the same time, I feel like we heard this 2 days, like, okay, you know, you have to go for it. But then at the same time you say, okay, but wait until you have money and a strategy. Can you develop a little bit on that?
Yeah, back to us Swedes again. We think, okay, if we have the 510K or some regulatory clearance, that's always how we start. We think we have this shiny, perfect product. Let's go sell it. It's the wrong way to do it. Let's start by finding what is the commercial, what is the reimbursement strategy, and what's the value prop we're solving. Then develop the product. Then go find the 510K. Then you launch. And I think we always do it the wrong way. Back to the question. What was it?
No, but I will remind you, both of you gentlemen, to speak slow, because I'm the oldest one, I'm sure, on this panel, so that I can hear you clearly. Suresh, what would be, I mean, because you really done this, I mean, as an American, but you have a lot of experience. What would your key considerations be from the get-go, creating a successful strategy to make it in the US?
Yeah, so for me, it's been a long journey, right? I came up, you know, through big companies, mid-sized companies, eventually a lot of startup companies. I was on the management team of a lot of venture-backed startup companies. Learned a lot in that process, and then eventually around 2008, 2009, started developing deals of my own, and that comes to the heart of your question, which is when we're founding something, the pre-investor, you know, before you talk to anybody about raising capital, you have to have your thesis baked. You need to look at all these details that I think Philip is talking about. What are we trying to achieve, you know, and how are we going to get there? Do we, you know, have the self-awareness to know we have these skills? Do we have it in our team? If we don't, can we get them? And how? And mapping that out from top down and then bottoms up as well. And then doing the work, right? That's the heart of it. You have to go actually then objectively get that information. And if you do that, you become sort of really passionate about it. And the investors can see that. And when you do that, The investment comes, and now it's execution. If you've got the right team in place, you're now in a really good trajectory to succeed because you understand the details, and where you have weaknesses, you've already sort of put things in place to make that something you can get over as you develop your technology.
I think that's really good advice. Were you that wise when you started off?
No, definitely not. My wife will tell you that too, right? I'm still not wise, but I think that you learn that as you go along, right? You go through experiences, good and bad, and you have to learn from those and collect that wisdom over time. At least in my case, I wasn't fortunate to know it, when I was 20, but through that, we actually now have a team of people. It's not just me. I surround myself with people that are smarter than me. And we actually try to fill the different gaps that are required. It takes a village to actually have a successful product that works in the clinic and that's attractive to strategics and then turns into a deal in the future.
Fiona, entering the US market, I have this idea that it is a matter of rather when rather than if you are going to get sued. Am I right there?
I think that's a hotly debated question, and I think you certainly need to think like that. Like looking at most of you today. I mean, I don't know how many have ended up in U.S. litigation. You look relatively calm, so probably not many. But it's startups. You would shoot me if I said put 10 million aside for US litigation. That's not something you're thinking of at this stage. So what should you do? What can you do now? And every defense, it starts with a good offense. So you get your own IP house in order and start thinking about your own patent portfolio. But always having one. That's not to say that you can't think about it, and it's something that you should be thinking about the US market early from day one, and preparing for that.
Suresh, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the foundational elements. Like you're right about that. I think people sometimes look at it as an afterthought, but we see that as a key piece of the value. And before we even start the company, we're thinking about what's going to be unique about this, what kind of IP can we get, and that's an important part of the value when you finally reach a potential deal in the future. And then obviously you have to be able to sell it, so it's also looking at it from a freedom to operate perspective and having clarity that whatever I'm about to do is not going to get encumbered. And that kind of stuff, if it comes up during diligence with an investor, it's a disaster, right? So you have to be really expert in it.
Absolutely. And there are good answers and bad answers. I do a lot of due diligence for investors. And, I'll ask the question, what have you done about FTO? And the answer is not, I haven't looked at it yet, it's too early. That may be true, but you've got to show that you're at least, you're asking for their money, potentially. You've got to show that you're responsible with it and you've taken steps to mitigate those risks. And even as a startup, you can have competitor intelligence, really know your market and know what your competitors are doing and know what's out there. And doing that initially tells you so much about future FTO, and you will look so there's a right way to answer that question. I help clients during their due diligence, and there's a way to impress investors, a right way and a wrong way to answer that question.
What is the right way?
You have to. Sorry, taking over. I think you need to be IPDD ready from day one. I really do.
Why?
It's never too early to think about an IP strategy, and once you've got your business plan in order, then immediately think, how can you use IP to support that? Because you're going out raising money, you've no product, so what do you have? You have your intellectual property, it's everything. Get IPDD ready. Build your data room from day one, right? Did you? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't be asking the questions, right? But
no, I want you to. That's how it works. What do you say?
I think people think it's a very expensive endeavor. FTO, it can be, right, if you want to go crazy on it, but I think that you have to do the work at some level. And there's ways to do it where you don't spend a lot of money. You have to spend some money, but it's a worthy investment because it's going to haunt you later, right? So that effort needs to be made. Like I said, you can't sell your product if somebody has a patent on what you're about to do, right? And you don't want your investor telling you about that, or your strategic counterparty when you're trying to do a deal. They're armed with attorneys. They'll come in and they'll ask you these questions, and you don't want to look like a deer in the headlights during that meeting, right? That's what that's for. It helps you support, what you're doing.
Philip, in your experience, how important is IP on your way to success, hopefully?
Think carefully.
Yeah. I mean, we started the company as we licensed IP from Mayo Clinic in the US, so that's the way we started. It took about 9 months, and then we were into the first lawsuit on the IP. So, and it's all about, like you said, it's having deep pockets, and in this case, we ended up buying the counterpart. It was cheaper to doing that than the litigation, but. I've been doing various ventures in the US for 20 years and been in so many IP attorneys and litigations and arbitrations, and it's a tricky one. Often it's the shiniest suits, I feel, that win. It's the best attorneys and not the IP itself. And even though we believe, we're naive Swedes, we think we have the perfect IP. It's all thought about. The Americans are slick. They win anyway, so often.
That's not so good news.
No, but it's about, and I say this to our clients in Scandinavia and in the UK, you've got to think like a US company from day one, and that means, don't think about getting your US IP filed early. They have, this is a bit of a generalization, but probably a lower bar for filing things. It's a little bit more about numbers. I don't advocate that. I still think you should file valuable IP, but you need to think a bit more about what your counterparts in the US are doing, so that you can be on a level playing field.
Yeah, but Fiona, apart from future litigation or IP, what is important to plan for when it comes to protecting your products? I mean, did we cover everything?
You mean what's from...
Is it anything else, law-wise, when it comes to protecting your IP that we should think about more than litigations?
Well, I think I always hate talking about litigation because I think that's seen as a nasty... Nobody wants to be in it. It's a nasty, it's a cost. I think of your IP as an asset and protect it. And protect it early, and I'm not just talking about patents here. Quite often I advise people not to file patents. I'm talking about your trade secrets and your brand. Start building value in your company early. Think about your own IP.
Which takes me to the next question. You'll have a choice, product or company. What is more important?
Well, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. I'm a product guy. And the reason for that is, after a lot of experiences, like I said, we're working with venture-backed firms. I was with one company, I raised over $100 million. Successful product. I was from the technical side in that deal. I wasn't the founder. I was, in the management team there. Product was doing about $80 million of top-line sales in second year out, so it was a good product. But we, ran into a lot of challenges, even on the IP side. We were actually sued by a big public company and had to go fight that, and it was north of $10 million of litigation, and there's some issues that had to be resolved there. As a private company, very difficult. These companies can find themselves upside down in the transactions that still can occur. In this case, it did. The company was acquired for quite a bit of money, a few years later by a big company. For founders and other stakeholders, that have common stock, you may end up with nothing in spite of a transaction, which is surprising, right? But it's because of the machinations of the financing, and that led us to sort of a more of a fast-to-market perspective where, a leaner capital model can still get you to a rational outcome. There's a lot of companies that have a balance sheet that can do a transaction between 50 and 200 million, we'll say. But at that lower edge of the range, a lot of deals get done there. And they can be very good if you're efficient, right? For your stakeholders, your investors, everybody can make money there. And so that sometimes gets lost, I think, in the big picture. And so those are inherently products. They're not companies, right? Because it's like the 510Ks Philip was talking about. we can get those to kind of commercial on a reasonable amount of money, then it's really did you pick wisely? Is it a good product? Does it get clinical traction? I'm not trying to build revenue. I'm trying to show almost like symbolic sales, I like to call it. You want to show that you kind of have something that has viability, and it's kind of what your PowerPoint originally said when you started. But the strategic can then take that initial sort of basis and then use their channel, which is really formidable, they've invested in it, and scale it. And that's where you get your synergy for acquisition.
Thank you. Also slow down so I can follow you really well. Philip, I know you care a lot about your product. I also know you care a lot about your company. What do you think when, if you have to make the choice?
I don't think it's the product, it's not the company, it's the value proposition. And it's simply what value am I bringing to this doctor, physician, and how can he make money on it? And that's all about US. Yes, it's important for the patient, but if there's not a super crisp, clear case for the physician, you're not going to succeed.
But what makes it crystal clear?
I mean, that you have this reimbursement strategy, or that there is a value prop that makes them, radically changes their workflow, or it makes them be able to bill for the device or the solution, or it provides a response to the patient immediately, something that changes, because patients in the US, they want a rapid response to everything. It's not like in Scandinavia where we wait. We're okay to wait 9 months to get an ECG assessment. And if you can help them to change their everyday workflow, then you have something. I think we're too much coming in with the Scandinavian products. I think we can make a difference. It's skip the feature set and find the prop. That's what sells.
Yeah, Fiona, do you have a strong opinion on this?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's the reimbursement strategy. I work a lot in digital therapeutics. It's a real, I never thought I'd end up working in digital therapeutics as a small molecule pharma person. But it's everywhere, and I think it's the next. I mean, I think patent attorneys see the next big thing first, and that is the key there. Is the value proposition. So if you have a new digital therapeutic product, for stopping smoking or something like that, if you're just selling the app for, £1 a go, that's not an investable business. It's about actually being a regulated therapeutic, being reimbursed, having patents and having IP that maps to that. Now, digital therapeutics and patents is a whole other challenging space, but I think that's the single most important thing, surely, is the value and how are they going to make money. I'd very much agree with that.
Okay, so after this will be some drinks, so I think it's fine for us to be a little bit vulnerable, or I am not going to be, but I'll ask you to be. So with this in mind, what would you consider your toughest challenge you faced so far addressing, and I mean now we talk specifically about addressing the US market. Suresh, you want to?
I mean, so many challenges come, I think, when you're developing technology, right? So I can pick a lane, on the regulatory side. A recent deal we did, it was an implant technology. We're taking it through the FDA in a arduous kind of clinical study pathway, but to get that approval to start the study can be quite challenging, right? Just opening the front door with the FDA. And I feel like we have a great team, really smart people, and in spite of that, in that journey, we ran into, 20-page deficiency, from the agency, right? So when that letter comes, it's a dark day, right? So you're kind of thinking, oh my God, right? How are we going to resolve this, right? But that's an example of a challenge that startups will see on their journey to success. That company was acquired last year by a public company in April, so we finally came out of it with a success. But it's an example of many different things that kind of come along the way where you feel like this company could go off the rails. You could be done, right? If you can't answer these questions. These are incredibly challenging scientific questions that you have to answer, and you have to stay within the boundaries of your money in the bank and your team's capabilities and all the things that kind of exist. You can't really do much more than what you've got, and you have to be resourceful with it. And so that's an example of a regulatory challenge that we've seen and experienced. And having a team that has resilience is what I feel like was something now that I reflect on it, one of our team members is a really great technical person. His response wasn't like, my God, the sky's falling. He was like, I think we can solve this, right? And that made me feel better, right? And so there's a whole thing around that, right, where your team matters, right? When you're making this journey and you run into these incredible challenges, you have to work together to solve them and get to the other side.
I mean, you'll both get to answer the same questions, but before, Suresh, I wonder, when is the time to give up? That say, okay, no, this is not, or you should continue to fight for it?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the lane, but we've seen products where, you get a 510K, barrier to entry from a regulatory perspective is pretty low for a 510K. You're comparing yourself to a predicate device, and so, okay, we're there now, we're so-called commercial product. But it doesn't mean it's going to work. We haven't even tried it yet, right? And you're gonna get the market telling you whether your bet is good, right? And that can be where decisions have to be made, because I've seen people pour, more capital on top of those, even when it's very vivid that your thing's not working, right? And so a lot of companies, have to keep that sort of pragmatism, I think, when they reach the kind of early commercial stage on med device in particular with 510Ks, for example. I think the same applies with some of these PMA type of products where you've done clinical work. Clinical studies are great, but a lot of these studies are fairly small, single-arm studies. The data is good, it gives you directionality, but when you put a product in the wild is when you actually get the realities of life, right? The doctors that are going to use it, are you going to get the same sort of real-world data from that? That's where you have to kind of keep an eye on it and make sure you don't continue to pour capital into something that doesn't have a path forward.
Okay, Philip, so you've been at this for a while. Can you take us back to a memory you have of a really tough challenge where you were doubting things?
Yeah, I mean, some of these IP issues have been challenging, absolutely. But I think one common is finding the right people and finding. You guys in the US generally are brilliant speakers and brilliant presenters, but it's hard to really, for us naive Swedes, to find who is actually the right person for us. And I mean, taken the approach over the years I've moved to the US 3 times to help set up the business and then ultimately recruit and find the right people on being there and then going back, because it's so hard for us here to find the right US guy or girl to run the business. Because we are different. We got to find people that understand us and then we understand them. Because ultimately it's like we're coming with some product or something we want to sell, and there needs to be a very crisp manual. This is how you do it, and this is what you're selling. The general American is super good at doing something which is very focused. And I think we are a little bit of everything. Not so focused always, but
do you consider that to be like the specific problem that Scandinavians have?
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I've hired so many people over the years that I've just been, wow, this guy seems fantastic. 4 weeks later, nothing happened. So it's.
Oh no! Now I understand the naivety.
Yeah. So this is probably an advertising for recruitment guys, but. I think that's why it's so good to be there on site. Again, saying this, you can't just go there for a week and think you're going to solve the world's problems. You have to really go bold and all in US and make sure you have the funding, that you have the board with you, and that you have the stretch. It's going to take time. It's going to cost a lot of money, and you're going to be hit down. And you're going to have like opportunities all over the US flying around. You're going to have a gold card on every flight, but are you getting anywhere? So it's coming back to focus and dare to focus. Maybe just focus on the big metropolitan New York region and go there. Don't do all of US at once.
Yeah, good advice. Fiona, what would you consider the toughest challenge in the US?
Do you know, I've preached about the importance of a US patent is the holy grail. It's really important. There's, you know, I would say, you know, as a European attorney, I'd probably say it's the most important. Not having a granted US patent is a red flag. And you know what? I would say, and my biggest challenge is they can be, if you get the wrong examiner, they can be hard to get. And I don't know if you've had experience of this, but sometimes if you're stuck with, quite frankly, a stupid, stubborn examiner, there's not a lot you can do apart from keep throwing money at it. And it's awful for startup companies. So I do wish I think in Europe it's a very good patent system. The US patent system leaves a lot to be desired, but you've just got to play the game. So you just got to play the game and get it granted, because once you do, you get that first one granted, you get more and more, and then, you know, but that to me is always a challenge.
Good, give us a tough love, Fiona. God knows we need it. But on a lighter note, then maybe, is there something like a Nordic card that we could play and should play more often?
The Nordic card. I mean, I've got through 510K or through the FDA with just real-world Swedish data. And it works. You don't have to use fancy US trials. And I think Swedish clinical data sells. When I was in a cardiology venture, my brag was this is Swedish. It comes from, and it's proven, and it's built, and it was actually built here in Lund, and that made a lot of physicians go, wow, cool, And also when we presented this to the FDA, their only objection was, okay, but you all Swedes, don't you all look the same, and blah, blah, blah. So give us some demographics to just show that these people are actually a little bit different. In which we did, and FDA said, fine, okay, let's go for it.
I mean, we like to see ourselves as, high in quality and reliable. Suresh, is that our rep over the seas?
No, definitely. I think, there's nothing negative if that's what you're fishing for. I think that people basically, in the US, I think they're going to look at the merits, right? So if you're presenting yourself, you come prepared, you have good data, you have good story to tell, you filled in the details. I don't think it matters whether you're Swedish or from any other country. I think they're going to look at, are you doing all the right things? Are you taking this seriously? And it's the same thing that you would see from a successful American entrepreneur, right? So I don't see it as some distinction, from any other country, Swede or otherwise, right?
No, I'm fishing for the best things, not the negative ones.
Very positive. It's like Philip said. I think people think highly of the Swedes. There's nothing negative about that. It's more. I've been listening to some of the talks here. I think you want to kind of come in with that preparation and be assertive about it. That you should. You have good data. You do good work. You have to kind of add all the rest of the elements together, and it will show well. You'll get the investors. You'll be successful with strategics if you do that.
Phew, we can all leave later on with a good feeling, like, oh, otherwise our world would be turned upside down. We can't leave until we raise the most important question. I'll take some extra time for that. If you are looking, and I think most of us are, to exit or partner, how do you maximize the chances of striking a deal in the US?
Yeah, so I think strategics are very smart, right? If you're privileged enough to get at the table with them, with something you've been building, they're going to ask you hard questions, and there's going to be a lot of diligence and a lot of digging, and so you kind of back, 6 steps from that. What do you need to do to look like that company that can answer those questions and be successful in that discussion, right? That's how I look at it. So it's exactly what you would see in a business plan or a pitch, right? We know how to make these slide decks, and we know how to tell that story, but the substance need to be there, right? And that's what you're going to be, having to defend, I think, at the time of a strategic being interested. So that's how I view it. All those foundational elements that we started with, right, that we said are important to us, you've filled in all those gaps. By the time you're having that discussion, your value goes way up. If you've de-risked these things and you have substance, your team is smart. Oftentimes they'll keep you there, after the transaction to continue working in the integration. The reason is because these are mostly sales and marketing organizations. They want the help for you to keep taking it forward for at least a little while. And that's kind of the key, is just kind of build your organization to look like that, when you have that opportunity.
Yeah. Before you move on, I want to ask, like, you started with saying, be prepared for some tough questions. Which ones should we be prepared for? Or some standards?
It's like anything, in a corporation, right? All the cross-functionality. So there's VP of this, VP of that, right? So there's going to be manufacturing and operations people that care about your scale, and can you make it? Can you make it cheaply enough to make a margin that matters? Can you tell us more about the regulatory? Are there any holes? Is your clinical data real, or is there something you're not telling me? Or is there an IP gap? There's so many buckets. You're going to be dealing with their attorneys, their, VP of this and that. And so those are the questions, right? It's classic sort of things that are operationally important to a company, and they're trying to figure out, should I pay a bunch of money to you to get that value? Is it real? And those are the questions you have to be able to answer.
Mm. Fiona, what would you say is the best advice to maximize your chances to strike a deal?
I would say dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So think very early about, if you want to enter the US, you start to look attractive to the US market. So file your US IP early.
I'm sorry, I have to ask this silly question. Is there a different dress code? Should we dress up or dress down more casually? Or don't you care about that in this world? Philip, be honest with us.
I'm trying to dress down because some Americans dress up and be different. Yeah.
They go all power suit, don't they?
Sure. No, but Philip, please close this with your best advice.
Be super self-confident. Play big. Dare to take risks. Have a brilliant IP strategy. And then in the med device world, get to $10 million in sales. Then you can do whatever you want. And then prove and tell the story that your customers are making money. And once they do that, and patients are happy and everybody, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. Either you scale up yourself or you get acquired by somebody.
Thank you so much for the inspiration. Philip Siberg, Fiona Law, Suresh Pai, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And I think it's time for closing words, right, Jonas, while we leave the stage. Send us off into that bike day.
Thank you very much to Sonia and the esteemed panelists. Thank you very, very much to all of you who has been with us yesterday and today. It's been a privilege to host you. A huge thank you to the BioStock team, who has done a tremendous job to get this in order and flowing as well as it has. Also, a huge thanks to our proud event partners, Clarkson, Nasdaq, Axial Group, TFS Health Science, and DME Back Bay team. Unless you've heard it before, we are going to publish this content that we've been filming for these 2 days on our YouTube channel and BioStock website, of course. That will probably happen next week. So if you want to share whatever content you have liked or didn't like, for that matter, then you feel free to do so and spread the word. I was going to say that look at these screens. We have some more events coming up. Events is not all we do, but we do like to do them. So we have one planned for September in Stockholm, and then we also have what used to be our flagship event. Maybe this is our new flagship event, I'm not sure yet. But the BioStock Summit in November. So you are all very welcome to join us back then. I hope I'm not forgetting anything, but the main message from my side is a big thank you again for coming and for helping out and for supporting us, especially to our far-flying guests from the US, Japan, and China. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And see you next year.